Welcome to this journey through the most disturbing intersections where human experience collides with the inexplicable boundaries of scientific understanding. Tell us where you're watching from now, because this story will challenge everything you believe about the nature of reality in a way few other accounts can. We're about to delve into mysteries that have confounded the most brilliant minds of our time, where the solid ground of empirical evidence crumbles beneath our feet and leaves us standing at the precipice of phenomena so profoundly inexplicable that science itself must acknowledge its own limitations. These are not stories of the supernatural or the paranormal. These are documented, verified, witnessed events that defy every law we thought governed our universe. It was the year 1994. The world was entering a new age of scientific confidence. The Human Genome Project was racing toward completion. The Hubble Space Telescope was revealing the deepest secrets of the cosmos. Computers were revolutionizing every aspect of human knowledge. We stood at the threshold of what many believed would be the final century of mystery, where science would ultimately explain everything, quantify everything, understand everything. But in the mountains of Zimbabwe, something happened that would remind us just how little we truly understand. The Ariel School sat on the outskirts of Ruwa, Zimbabwe, approximately 20 kilometers from the capital city of Harare. It was a private elementary school, unremarkable in most ways, serving the children of local families in a region where the modern world and ancient landscapes existed in uneasy coexistence. The September weather was warm, approaching the height of the southern hemisphere spring, with clear skies that stretched endlessly above the African plateau. On the morning of September 16, 1994, 2 children between the ages of 6 and 12 were playing during morning recess. Their teachers remained inside the school building, taking their brief respite from the controlled chaos of young minds. The playground bordered directly onto a stretch of undeveloped land, rough terrain covered with scrub brush and indigenous vegetation that had remained unchanged for centuries. What happened next would be investigated by one of the world's most respected researchers into human consciousness, would generate reports filed with multiple government agencies, and would leave a scar of bewilderment on the scientific community that persists 30 years later. At approximately 10:15 a.m., 2 children witnessed something descending from the clear morning sky. The accounts were remarkably consistent. Silver objects, multiple craft, moving with impossible physics. Descended no one WILL outly it s, ILENTLY, defying gravity, defying aerodynamics, defying everything these children had been taught about how objects move through space. The craft landed in the rough terrain beyond the playground fence, and then the beings emerged. Tall figures, the children said, beings with enormous eyes that seemed to penetrate directly into consciousness itself. They moved with a fluidity that wasn't quite walking, wasn't quite floating, but something disturbingly between. They wore dark, form-fitting clothing that seemed to be part of their bodies rather than worn upon them. The beings approached the fence line. They looked directly at the children, and according to multiple witnesses, something passed between them that wasn't quite communication, wasn't quite telepathy, but something far more invasive. Images, thoughts, warnings about the future of Earth, about environmental destruction, about technological advancement racing ahead of wisdom. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the beings returned to their craft. The objects rose silently into the morning sky and vanished. The children stood frozen, traumatized, transformed by what they had witnessed. When the teachers emerged minutes later, they found their students in various states of distress. Some were crying, others stood mute, staring at the empty sky. A few tried desperately to explain what they had seen, their words tumbling over each other in the universal language of trauma and disbelief. The teacher's first assumption was mass hysteria, perhaps a shared delusion, a game that had gotten out of hand, the kind of collective imagination that can occasionally sweep through groups of children. But as they interviewed the students separately, as they documented the accounts, as they contacted parents and authorities, a disturbing pattern emerged. The stories were too consistent, too detailed, too traumatizing to be fabrication. Dr. John Mack arrived in Zimbabwe 2 months later, a professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of T.E. Lawrence. Mack was one of the most respected psychological researchers in the world. He had recently turned his attention to the phenomenon of reported alien encounters, approaching the subject with the rigorous methodology of academic psychiatry rather than the sensationalism that usually accompanied such investigations. When he interviewed the children of Ariel School, he found something that shook him to his core. These were not fantasists, they were not attention seekers. They were traumatized witnesses to something that had fundamentally altered their understanding of reality. The video footage of these interviews still exists. You can watch it yourself. Study the faces of these children as they struggle to articulate their experience. Notice the tears, notice the fear, notice the way their eyes dart, as if still seeing something the camera cannot capture. Notice how their hands shake as they draw pictures of the beings they encountered, images remarkably similar despite being created independently. His eyes were big and black. One girl says, her voice small and frightened, "He looked at me and I knew things. I knew we were destroying the earth. I knew technology was bad. I knew these things without him speaking. Doctor." Mack documented these accounts with clinical precision. He applied standard psychological assessment tools. He looked for signs of coaching, of fabrication, of mass delusion. He found none of the markers that typically indicate false memories or constructed narratives. Instead, he found genuine trauma, real psychological impact, the kind of deep disturbance that comes from experiences that shatter fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. But the Ariel School incident, as disturbing as it remains, is merely one thread in a far larger tapestry of unexplained phenomena that science cannot ignore, cannot explain, cannot file away as solved. Consider the phenomenon known as the wow signal. On August 15, 1977, Dr. Jerry Amen was reviewing data from the Big Ear Radio Telescope at Ohio State University. The telescope was part of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, constantly scanning the cosmos for any hint of artificial signals from beyond Earth. At 11:16 p.m., the telescope detected something extraordinary. A narrowband radio signal at 1,420 megahertz, the frequency of neutral hydrogen, and one of the most significant wavelengths in the universe. The signal was strong, 30 times more powerful than the background noise of space. It bore all the hallmarks of artificial origin: narrow frequency, constant wavelength, originating from a specific point in space. The signal lasted for exactly 72 seconds, the maximum duration the telescope could observe any given point before Earth's rotation carried it out of view. Dr. Amen was so startled that he circled the computer printout and wrote a single word in the margin: "Wow." The signal has never been detected again, despite countless subsequent observations of that same region of space. Every conventional explanation has been examined and found wanting. It wasn't terrestrial interference. The frequency is protected internationally. It wasn't a satellite. None were in position to generate such a signal. It wasn't a reflection or artifact. The pattern doesn't match those phenomena. For 47 years, the wow signal has remained exactly what it appeared to be, a single, powerful, artificial-seeming transmission from the depths of interstellar space that science can neither explain nor replicate. The universe, it seems, sent us a message. We just don't know what it said. But perhaps even more disturbing than signals from space are the phenomena that occur right here on Earth, in environments we believe we understand completely, following rules we thought we had mapped with precision. The Tao's hum began in the early 1990s, though some residents claim it had been present for years before anyone began documenting it systematically. In the small town of Taos, New Mexico, a percentage of the population estimates range from 2% to 11%, began reporting a persistent, low-frequency humming sound that no instruments could detect. Describe it as a diesel engine idling in the distance, they said, a refrigerator running in another room, a continuous, maddening drone that never stopped, never varied, never provided any source that could be identified and eliminated. The afflicted couldn't sleep. They developed headaches, nausea, dizziness, nosebleeds. Some became suicidal from the relentless auditory assault that no one else could perceive. Scientists descended on Taos. They brought acoustic equipment, seismographs, electromagnetic sensors. They measured every possible source of vibration and sound. They checked industrial equipment, underground facilities, geological formations, atmospheric conditions. They found nothing. The University of New Mexico conducted an extensive study. The findings were published in peer-reviewed journals. The conclusion was stark and unsettling. A significant percentage of Taos residents were genuinely perceiving a sound that instruments could not detect and that other humans could not hear. The phenomenon wasn't limited to Taos. Similar reports emerged from Bristol, England, from Windsor, Ontario, from locations scattered across the globe where certain individuals perceived a maddening hum that science insisted didn't exist. The theories multiplied like desperate prayers, extremely low, frequency electromagnetic waves that some nervous systems could perceive as sound, tinnitus triggered by unknown environmental factors affecting susceptible individuals, mass psychogenic illness, a shared delusion born from suggestion and anxiety. But none of the theories fit all the data. None could explain why the hum was geographically localized, why it affected only certain individuals, why it could drive people to desperation while remaining utterly undetectable to instruments specifically designed to measure sound. The Tao's hum continues to this day. People still hear it. Science still has no explanation. Reality, it seems, contains frequencies we cannot measure. On June 30th, 1908, something exploded over the Tunguska region of Siberia with the force of a 15-megaton nuclear bomb. The blast leveled 80 million trees across 150 square kilometers of remote forest. The shockwave circled the Earth twice, registered on seismographs as far away as Washington, D.C. Witnesses hundreds of kilometers from the blast site reported seeing a fireball streak across the morning sky. For weeks afterward, night skies across Europe and Asia glowed with strange luminescence. People in London could read newspapers outdoors at midnight by the ethereal light. The phenomenon baffled scientists and intrigued the public, but the remote location and political turmoil in Russia prevented any immediate investigation. It wasn't until 1927 that the first scientific expedition reached the blast site. What they found was even more puzzling than the explosion itself. The devastation was enormous, but there was no crater. Trees at ground zero remained standing, stripped of branches and bark, transformed into eerie wooden sentinels pointing toward the sky. The blast pattern radiated outward in a perfect butterfly shape, suggesting an aerial explosion of incomprehensible power. But there was no meteorite, no debris, no physical remnant of whatever had unleashed such devastating force. For over a century, scientists have proposed theories. A meteor that exploded in the atmosphere before impact. A fragment of comet composed primarily of ice that vaporized completely. A small black hole passing through Earth. An antimatter meteor. A natural gas explosion from the ground. Even more exotic possibilities involving mini black holes or strangelets from space. Each theory explains some aspects of the Tunguska event. None explains everything: the lack of crater, the unusual blast pattern, the atmospheric phenomena that persisted for weeks, the complete absence of any meteoritic material despite exhaustive searching. The Tunguska forest has regrown. The devastated area is now covered with new trees, a green scar over the wound that reality itself suffered more than a century ago. But the mystery remains unsolved, a reminder that even the most dramatic events on Earth can defy our attempts to understand them. And if the Tunguska event was something that happened once, in one place, there are other phenomena that happen repeatedly, consistently, seemingly mocking our attempts to bring them under the umbrella of scientific understanding: ball lightning. For centuries, witnesses have reported seeing luminous spheres appearing during thunderstorms, floating through the air, passing through walls, occasionally exploding with devastating force. The spheres are described as ranging from golf ball to beach ball size, glowing with various colors, moving with apparent intelligence or purpose, lasting from seconds to minutes before vanishing or detonating. Scientists dismissed these reports for generations as optical illusions, retinal afterimages from regular lightning strikes, or simple fabrications. But the reports were too consistent, too detailed, coming from too many credible witnesses, including trained scientists and pilots. In recent decades, ball lightning has been tentatively accepted as a real phenomenon. Laboratory experiments have managed to create short-lived plasma spheres that superficially resemble some reported characteristics of ball lightning. But the laboratory creations last only milliseconds, require enormous energy input, and don't explain most of the reported behaviors, particularly the ability to pass through solid walls or float against wind currents. A Russian scientist named Pyotr Kapitsa proposed that ball lightning might be sustained by radio, frequency electromagnetic radiation from the thunderstorm itself. But this doesn't explain the sphere's apparent ability to navigate complex environments or their occasional explosive termination. A research team from Zhejiang University in China managed to capture ball lightning on high-speed video in 2012, the first confirmed footage of the phenomenon. The analysis revealed the presence of silicon, iron, and calcium, supporting one theory that ball lightning forms from vaporized soil. But even this breakthrough left more questions than answers. The energy requirements don't match observed duration. The formation mechanism remains unclear. The ability to penetrate solid objects remains unexplained. Ball lightning remains, even today, a phenomenon that science acknowledges but cannot fully explain. It exists in that uncomfortable zone where empirical observation meets theoretical confusion, where reality performs tricks that our models cannot replicate. But perhaps the most disturbing category of unexplained phenomena are those that involve human consciousness itself, experiences that suggest our understanding of the mind, of perception of. Boundary between the self and the external world may be fundamentally incomplete. Terminal lucidity. The phenomenon occurs in patients with severe dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or other conditions involving profound cognitive impairment. Days or hours before death, these patients suddenly regain complete mental clarity. They recognize loved ones they haven't acknowledged in years. They speak coherently about memories that should be inaccessible. They become, briefly, themselves again. Then they die. The phenomenon has been documented in medical literature for over 2 centuries, but it contradicts everything we think we understand about how brain damage affects consciousness. If dementia has destroyed the neural structures necessary for memory and cognition, how can those functions suddenly return? The brain damage hasn't healed, the neurons haven't regenerated, yet consciousness returns, complete and intact, just before the final dissolution. Dr. Alexander Bathini at the University of Vienna has been documenting cases of terminal lucidity, finding that it occurs in approximately 10% of dementia patients shortly before death. The consistency of the phenomenon suggests it's not random, not coincidental, but following some pattern that our current understanding of neuroscience cannot accommodate. Some researchers have proposed that consciousness may not be entirely generated by the brain, that the brain might function more as a receiver or filter for consciousness rather than its source. This would allow for consciousness to persist despite brain damage, manifesting clearly once certain biological constraints are lifted as death approaches. But this is speculation, not science. The phenomenon remains unexplained, a crack in the foundation of materialist neuroscience. And then there are the cases rare but documented of acquired savant syndrome. Individuals who suffer traumatic brain injury or neurological incidents and suddenly develop extraordinary abilities they never possessed before. Derek Amato dove into a shallow pool in 2006, striking his head on the bottom with tremendous force. He suffered a severe concussion and hearing loss, but when he recovered, he discovered he could suddenly play piano at a professional level despite having no previous musical training. He could see musical structure in his mind, could compose complex pieces, could perform with the skill of someone who had practiced for decades. Jason Paget was attacked outside a karaoke bar in 2002, suffering a traumatic brain injury that left him with severe PTSD and obsessive-compulsive disorder. But he also began seeing the world through a lens of complex mathematical geometry. Every curve, every shape, every movement appeared to him as a mathematical equation. He began drawing these visions intricate fractal patterns and geometric representations of mathematical concepts. Mathematicians who examined his work confirmed he was illustrating legitimate mathematical relationships despite having no formal training beyond basic algebra. The mechanism behind acquired savant syndrome remains mysterious. Some researchers suggest the brain damage removes inhibitory functions, allowing previously suppressed abilities to emerge. Others propose that injury forces massive neural reorganization, accidentally creating new pathways that enable extraordinary skills. But why would the brain possess these latent capabilities? Why would extraordinary mathematical or musical abilities be present but suppressed? The explanations feel incomplete, as if we're describing the shadow of a process we cannot fully see. Dr. Gary Nolan stands at a microscope in his laboratory at Stanford University. He is a professor of pathology, one of the world's leading experts in immunology and genetics, with over 300 published papers and numerous awards for his scientific contributions. He is not a person predisposed to believing in things that cannot be measured, quantified, analyzed. But for the past several years, Dr. Nolan has been studying something that challenges the boundaries of his understanding. He has been analyzing biological samples from individuals who claim close, range encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena. These are people, often military personnel, pilots, trained observers, who have experienced proximity to objects that appear to defy known physics. And a significant percentage of these individuals show unusual neurological changes visible on brain scans. The caudate putamen, a region deep in the brain, shows increased neural density in these individuals. The changes are consistent, measurable, real. They suggest neurological alterations that correlate with reported experiences. What we're seeing is not normal, Dr. Nolan stated in a 2022 interview. These are real biological changes in real people. Whatever they experienced, it had a measurable effect on their neurology. The implications are disturbing. Either these individuals are developing unusual brain patterns that predispose them to misinterpreting normal phenomena as extraordinary, or they are genuinely encountering something that has the capability to alter human neurology in specific, consistent ways. Neither explanation is comfortable. Dr. Nolan's work represents a shift in how serious scientists are approaching these phenomena. Rather than dismissing reports as hallucinations or fabrications, researchers are asking, what if something is actually happening? What if these experiences, whatever their ultimate explanation, are having measurable effects on human biology? The United States government, after decades of official denial and dismissal, has begun acknowledging that unexplained aerial phenomena represent a genuine scientific and national security question. In 2021, the Pentagon released a preliminary assessment on unidentified aerial phenomena, confirming that there are objects in our airspace that demonstrate flight characteristics we cannot explain. With current technology, the report documented 144 encounters between 2004 and 2021, mostly reported by military aviators. In 18 cases, objects demonstrated unusual flight characteristics, including remaining stationary in high winds, moving against strong winds, maneuvering abruptly, and moving at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. The report stated, some UAP appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed, without discernible means of propulsion. Without discernible means of propulsion, read that phrase again. Let its implications settle into your understanding. Objects are operating in our airspace, observed by trained military personnel using sophisticated sensor systems that move in ways that violate our understanding of physics and propulsion. The government report doesn't claim these are alien spacecraft. It doesn't make any definitive claims about origin, but it does acknowledge officially that something is happening that we cannot explain. Commander David Fravor, a former U.S. Navy pilot, encountered one of these objects in 2004 off the coast of California. The incident is now famous as the Tic Tac encounter, named after the object's appearance, a smooth, white, elongated shape with no wings, no exhaust, no visible means of propulsion. Fravor's account has been corroborated by multiple pilots, radar operators, and weapons systems officers. The object was tracked on multiple sensor systems simultaneously. It moved from 0 feet to sea level in less than a second. It accelerated with forces that would have killed any human pilot, reaching speeds that should have generated sonic booms that were never detected. It was not from this world, Fravor stated in multiple interviews. I'm not saying it was extraterrestrial, but it was something that defied our physics as we understand it. The scientific establishment has struggled with how to respond to these reports. For decades, academic careers were destroyed by association with UFO research. The topic was considered pseudoscience, the domain of conspiracy theorists and attention seekers. But the accumulation of evidence from military personnel, from government censors, from credible witnesses with nothing to gain from fabrication, has forced a reluctant acknowledgement. Dr. Avi Loeb, chairman of Harvard's astronomy department, has become one of the most prominent scientists willing to publicly discuss the possibility that some unidentified phenomena might represent evidence of extraterrestrial technology. His willingness to engage with the topic has made him controversial among his colleagues, but he argues that the scientific method demands we follow evidence wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable the implications. We have a responsibility, Dr. Loeb has stated, to investigate phenomena that our instruments detect and our personnel observe, even if those phenomena seem to challenge our existing models. That's what science is supposed to do. But these aerial phenomena are merely the most dramatic examples of a deeper problem facing modern science. The universe appears to contain pockets of reality that resist our attempts at explanation, the placebo effect. Everyone knows about it. The phenomenon where patients improve simply because they believe they're receiving treatment, even when given inert substances. Medicine has known about the placebo effect for centuries, routinely controlling for it in clinical trials. But the placebo effect keeps getting stronger. Studies from the 1990s show significantly larger placebo responses than identical studies from the 1970s. The same condition, the same testing protocols, but wildly different placebo response rates. In some recent studies, particularly in pain management and depression research, the placebo effect has become so powerful that legitimate pharmaceutical treatments can barely outperform it. This makes no sense under our standard understanding. If placebo is simply the psychological expectation of improvement, why would that expectation have become more powerful over time? Have human brains fundamentally changed in their ability to influence their own biology? Even stranger are the cases of placebo effects that manifest without any conscious expectation. Studies using concealed placebos where patients are told they're receiving placebo treatments still show measurable improvements over control groups receiving nothing at all. The patients know they're not receiving active medication, yet their conditions improve anyway. The phenomenon suggests that the relationship between mind and body, between consciousness and biology, is far more complex and powerful than our models accommodate. We can measure the placebo effect. We can demonstrate it repeatedly. But we cannot adequately explain how belief alone can trigger genuine biological changes, how the immaterial thought can manifest as material healing. And then there are the phenomena that seem to mock the very concept of causality itself, presentiment, the ability to react to stimuli before they occur. This sounds like pseudoscience, like the kind of claim that rigorous experimental design should easily disprove. But it hasn't been disproven. Instead, it's been repeatedly demonstrated under controlled laboratory conditions. The typical experimental design is simple. Participants are shown a series of images on a computer screen. Some images are neutral landscapes, household objects. Others are emotionally arousing violent scenes, erotic images, disturbing photographs. The images are selected randomly by the computer and displayed in random sequence. Researchers measure physiological responses, heart rate, skin conductance, pupil dilation. These are automatic responses, not under conscious control, that reliably spike when viewing emotionally charged images. Here's the disturbing part. The physiological responses begin several seconds before the emotional image appears on the screen. The effect has been replicated in over 40 published studies by researchers around the world. The statistical significance is robust. Something about the human nervous system appears to be reacting to future events before those events occur. Dr. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has been studying presentiment for decades. His research has been published in peer-reviewed journals and has withstood scrutiny from skeptical researchers attempting to find methodological flaws. The data are clear. Dr. Radin has stated, "The body is responding to something that hasn't happened yet. We can argue about interpretation, but the measurements are reliable and repeatable. How do you explain this? Time doesn't work backward. Causality flows in one direction. Effects follow causes. They don't precede them. Yet here is a phenomenon, measured and verified, that seems to violate this most fundamental rule of reality." The theories attempting to explain presentiment venture into uncomfortable territory. Some researchers propose that time itself might be more fluid than we perceive, that the rigid past, present, future sequence might be an illusion created by consciousness. Others suggest that quantum entanglement, where particles remain mysteriously connected regardless of distance, might allow information to propagate backward through time under certain conditions. These aren't scientific explanations. They're desperate attempts to reconcile data with worldviews, to force uncomfortable observations into theoretical frameworks that were never designed to contain them. We stand now, in 2024, with computational power that would have seemed like magic a century ago. We have sequenced the human genome, photographed black holes, sent robots to Mars, created artificial intelligence that can write poetry and diagnose disease. We understand the universe from the quantum scale to the cosmic scale, from the first microseconds after the Big Bang to the eventual heat death trillions of years hence. And yet, 2 children in Zimbabwe witnessed something that Harvard psychiatrists could neither explain nor dismiss. A radio telescope detected a signal from space that perfectly resembled artificial transmission, but has never repeated. A percentage of the population hears a sound that instruments cannot measure. Objects operate in our airspace with physics we cannot replicate. The mind influences the body through mechanisms we cannot map. The nervous system responds to events that haven't yet occurred. These are not ancient mysteries preserved in ambiguous texts. These are modern phenomena, documented with contemporary technology, investigated by credentialed scientists, occurring in the fully illuminated present day. The history of science is a history of expanding understanding. Each generation believes it has nearly completed the puzzle, that just a few more pieces remain before the picture becomes complete. Then something forces a paradigm shift: heliocentrism, evolution, relativity, quantum mechanics, and the puzzle explodes into something far larger and stranger than anyone anticipated. Perhaps we are living through such a moment now. Perhaps the accumulation of unexplained phenomena isn't evidence that science has failed, but evidence that our current scientific paradigm is approaching its limits, that reality is preparing to reveal itself as something far more complex and mysterious than we have allowed ourselves to imagine. Dr. John Mack, who traveled to Zimbabwe to interview those traumatized children, faced tremendous professional backlash for taking their accounts seriously. Harvard Medical School launched an investigation into his research, questioning whether studying reported alien encounters was appropriate for a tenured professor of psychiatry. He faced ridicule from colleagues accusations of abandoning scientific rigor, suggestions that he had become a believer rather than a researcher. But Mack refused to dismiss what he had witnessed. He had sat with those children, looked into their eyes, measured their trauma. He knew genuine psychological distress when he encountered it, and he insisted that science had an obligation to investigate experiences simply because they were reported by credible witnesses, regardless of how uncomfortable those experiences might be for existing theoretical frameworks. In 2004, Dr. John Mack was struck by a drunk driver while walking in London. He died at the scene. His investigation of human consciousness and unexplained experiences left incomplete. But his legacy persists in researchers like Dr. Gary Nolan, Dr. Avi Loeb, Dr. Dean Reid, and scientists willing to risk professional reputation to investigate phenomena that resist easy explanation. They are not abandoning the scientific method. They are applying it to areas where the method has been deliberately avoided, where the data has been deemed too uncomfortable to examine. The children of Ariel School are adults now. Many of them have spoken publicly about their experience, describing how that September morning in 1994 fundamentally altered their understanding of reality. They remain consistent in their accounts. The trauma has not faded. Whatever they witnessed, whether it was genuinely beings from another world, some natural phenomenon we don't yet understand, or a collective psychological experience of unprecedented power, it was real to them in the most profound sense. Emily Trim, one of the witnesses, now works as an artist, creating work inspired by the encounter. She speaks openly about how the experience gave her a sense of responsibility for Earth's environment, a conviction that humanity is racing toward catastrophe unless we fundamentally change our relationship with technology and nature. Those beings showed me things. She has said in interviews, "They showed me the Earth from above, surrounded by pollution and destruction. They showed me that we have a choice to make. I can't prove it happened the way I remember it, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt, and I know it was more real than anything else I've ever experienced." The wow signal remains unexplained. Searches continue. Astronomers still point telescopes at that region of space, hoping for a repetition that has not come. The 72 seconds of data sit in archives, analyzed and reanalyzed, a tantalizing hint that something out there might have tried to reach us. The Tao's hum continues. People still hear it, still suffer from it, still find that no doctor, no scientist, no expert can offer relief or explanation. The Tunguska forest grows thick and green over the site of devastation. Ball lightning still appears unpredictably in thunderstorms. Terminal lucidity still grants dying patients brief returns to consciousness. Acquired savants still emerge from brain trauma with impossible skills. The placebo effect still grows mysteriously stronger. Presentiment studies still show nervous systems reacting to futures that haven't yet arrived. These phenomena don't disprove science, they challenge it. They invite it to expand, to acknowledge that the map of reality we've drawn might be missing entire continents of experience that exist beyond our current ability to measure or explain. The most honest answer science can give is this: we don't know. We don't know what those children saw. We don't know what sent the wow signal. We don't know what causes the Tao's hum. We don't know what exploded over Tunguska. We don't know what ball lightning actually is. We don't know how consciousness can return to destroyed brains. We don't know why trauma can unlock extraordinary abilities. We don't know how belief alone can heal. We don't know how the body predicts the future. And acknowledging that we don't know genuinely don't know, not as a temporary gap in knowledge, but as a fundamental limitation of current understanding, might be the most important step toward eventually finding answers. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. Reality doesn't care about our theories, our models, our comfortable assumptions about how things work. It simply exists, operating according to rules we're still struggling to decipher. And occasionally, in events like those September morning in Zimbabwe, in signals from space, in hums only some can hear, in lights that dance through thunderstorms, in minds that briefly return from dissolution, in talents that emerge from injury, in healing that follows belief, in nervous systems that feel the future reality reminds us just how much we have yet to understand. The story of unexplained phenomena is not a story of supernatural magic or pseudoscientific nonsense. It's the story of reality being larger, stranger, more complex than we have allowed ourselves to imagine. It's the story of phenomena that exist in the uncomfortable space between what we can measure and what we can explain, between what happens and what should be possible. And it's a story that continues. Right now, someone is experiencing something that science cannot explain. Right now, an instrument is detecting something that doesn't fit our models. Right now, reality is performing one of its strange tricks, leaving observers bewildered and scientists scrambling for frameworks that can contain the inexplicable. The unknown isn't diminishing. If anything, as our instruments become more sensitive and our observations more detailed, we're discovering that the universe contains more mysteries than we ever suspected. Perhaps that's not a failure. Perhaps that's an invitation. To this day, on clear September mornings in Zimbabwe, when the light falls across the playground at Ariel School in just the right way, people report feeling something watching from beyond the fence line. The children who witnessed the impossible have scattered across the world, carrying their experience like a burden and a gift, forever changed by 60, 2 shared seconds when reality revealed itself as something far stranger than classroom lessons had prepared them to encounter. If this journey through the boundaries of human understanding has resonated with you, if you find yourself lying awake wondering what those children truly saw, what message the cosmos might have sent us, what secrets still hide in the unmapped territories between the known and the impossible, then consider subscribing to the Untold Hour. There are phenomena still waiting to be examined, mysteries preserved in official reports and traumatized memories, experiences that occurred but cannot be explained. Each demands investigation. Each deserves recognition. Each challenges us to acknowledge that our understanding of reality might be far more incomplete than we've allowed ourselves to believe. Leave a like if this account provoked questions that extend beyond curiosity into genuine philosophical vertigo. Comment sharing your own unexplained experiences, the moments when reality bent just enough to let you glimpse something beyond the ordinary. And perhaps tonight, look up at the stars. Consider that among those distant lights might be the source of a 72-second signal we received but never understood. Consider that the universe might be trying to speak to us in languages we have not yet learned to hear. Until next time, question everything, especially the things we claim to know.